Welcome to Pesto Comics Audio Edition. This is the entry for January 1st, 2025. Happy New Year! Great to have you with me, and welcome back. I generally like to look forward. It's a real problem, actually. I have a really hard time living in the moment, as many would say, as I'm always looking at the next thing. If I'm on a trip, I'm imagining what the next part of it's going to be like. I'm even fantasizing about the trip home and getting into my own bed. Even though I may have been looking forward to that trip for months, I'm always looking past it. And I have to say the same thing with all of my creative endeavors I've ever done. Even though I might be in the midst of a campaign or in the middle of writing something, I'm always thinking about the next project that I could be working on. A way around all this is to plan, and plan very carefully. I have multiple places that I write things down, that I collect all my information, giving myself the opportunity to do that thinking ahead and not restricting myself so much, but still being able to finish the task at hand. It's a small miracle that I managed to get this newsletter out every single week. All that said, I've been really looking forward to this post, sharing everything that I have planned for 2025. It's going to seem like an awful lot, and frankly it is. However, the good news is a lot of this is actually grounded in some sense of reality, as I've already worked on a lot of it. If you were here last week for my recap of 2024 and you're really mean and went back and looked at this post for 2024, you'll see how much has changed and how much I didn't get done. A big part of that was a lot of those projects were in an early state, and I was still hoping to get a lot of work done, and a lot of times there are parts that were out of my control. I wasn't able to actually get some of those things launched. Some of it was entirely my control, and it was just a decision that maybe this isn't what I'm going to focus all my time on. So today I've broken up the post into a number of categories, comics being the first one. You're here for Pesto Comics, so of course, let's talk comics. But I'm expanding into a whole bunch of other stuff. A lot of it's already in flight and just not ready for prime time quite yet, but will be coming out this year. But there's those other projects that I've been brainstorming or are still in outline stages or very early drafts. Those I put in a category called very early stages. So I'll tell you everything I have planned, even the stuff that may not see the light of day. But a lot of this, again, is in progress in some form or fashion. There's a draft that's somewhat ready out there. There's work that's out there with editors. There is art that's done in a lot of cases. I'm very excited to share what the slate is. I'm sharing a very small one at the end of every post, which has basically been Naked Kaiju Woman and the various issues of From Parts Unknown. But I have so much more that I'm working on, and I'm happy to finally share it. I probably won't do this kind of rundown at the end of every post because I don't want to take another 40 minutes on top of everything at the end of every post. But as things get to a point where I can start nailing dates down, they'll show up on that Pesto Comics release calendar. Very excited to share all of the things I'm working on, and hopefully I can get you excited too. So, with all of that in mind, let's get started, and we'll start by talking about some comics. In 7 days, we will be launching Naked Kaiju Woman. That is January 8th. You will be able to back Naked Kaiju Woman. I always try to launch these around 8 a.m., 9 a.m. It really, if I'm being entirely honest, depends on when I'm able to get to my desk in the morning. But that's when I launch on January 8th. I will hit that button. You'll be able to finally back this campaign. It's no secret that I pre-recorded this post along with a handful of others through the holiday season. So as of right now, we're still in the early stages of collecting followers. But I sure hope we're in the triple digits by now as you're listening to this. And if not, please visit that pre-launch page and help us get there. And if we're already there, help us get even further. If this launch is as big as I hope, I have so much more planned beyond this. I'll be working with Raphael on the next 4 issues of this book. He's very excited to get on top of it. I've been slow in getting him issue 2 because I really want to make sure it's ready. The way I've gone with these books is a little different than what I did with From Parts Unknown, in the sense that these are one-off stories that have sequels. So although it's a series, each book is its own self-contained story, not unlike everything else I've written with a crazy latte thing called Love, Unlimited Udo, or Stay Cool. Those books are all self-contained. You get a full beginning, middle, and end, where From Parts Unknown is more serialized. So I'm feeling a little more comfortable getting those out over time, but my goal is to at least get the second, maybe even third issue out in 2025. So that is the hope, that Naked Kaiju Woman #1 launches in January, and then hopefully by the spring I'm able to set a date for that second issue, And midsummer, I can tell you when the third one is coming. It may get pushed out to 2026, who knows? It really depends on how Raphael's schedule goes and how much work he's getting outside of what I'm able to give him. But my goal is to at least get 2, hopefully 3 issues out this year. Speaking of getting issues out, from Parts Unknown, I've said it for months now that Daniel blew me away with not only how fast he is, but how he's been able to maintain, if not exceed, his quality with each issue. Each one he's sent has just been amazing, and it seems to get better every time he sends a new page. I can't wait for you to see it. As of this recording, I'm getting the climax. I'm getting the last few pages of issue 4 that leads into an epic issue 5. And it starts getting more and more wild in terms of how the action and just the story beats go. It gets very exciting. It really tries to pay off everything it set up in those first 3 issues. And I think the 5th issue is a wonderful capper to this whole story. And the goal is to get this whole series out by mid-year 2025. We're talking June, July. You should be able to read the entire story beginning to end. That's really the hope. I know it's always been one of the issues with serialized work from indie creators that you're limited in how frequently you're receiving issues. If you're used to a monthly schedule when you're reading Batman or Spider-Man, you're not getting that from the indie set. Reasonably so, right? It's a lot more challenging when you have 1 or 2 or 3 creators putting these books together. So in a way to mitigate that, I've taken on all of the risk and have everybody working ahead so that I can get these all out in quick succession. If the pre-launch for From Parts Unknown isn't already available, and if it is, I'll leave a link in the Substack, but if it isn't, it will be very soon. My goal is to start, again, collecting those followers nice and early so that issue 2 is even bigger than issue 1, and it hopefully snowballs, and by the time we're at issue 5, it becomes something that it's unmissable, and that's really the hope. And I think the way the story has come together, you're really going to feel that too. It builds with each issue in such a way that you're not going to want to miss how it ends. So I'm very excited for that project. Another project I've been working on very quietly, I'm not going to even share the title. However, I've been working with a very respected and frankly, I'm very impressed that she's even willing to work with me, very big editor, in getting a pitch together. And I have a project that I've been keeping very close to the vest because it's still in the early stages even as I record this, but I'm working with an editor that I have a ton of respect for, and I'll be sharing that name once we're in a better position. But she's worked with some of my favorite creators, and she's local to Toronto. Given all these hints I've given you, you could probably narrow it down if you know the scene. But she's been absolutely wonderful in getting this mini-series that we're pitching to a couple of publishers into something so much better than what I had in my head. It's something I didn't have entirely whole cloth. I had an aesthetic, I had a couple characters very clear in my mind, and a very basic setup scenario, but I didn't have that full story with the stakes and everything until she was able to really guide the story and get it to where it needed to be. So it's been an absolute pleasure working with her. It means a ton, and I think this is going to be, if it gets picked up by a publisher, it's going to be huge. I think everyone who enjoys my work will really enjoy what we're putting together here. And the artists I have lined up, and hopefully I can get them to commit to something. Again, you'll really appreciate their work. I've spoken about them before. You may have seen their work around. I mean, if this all comes together, it's going to be huge. So I really hope that comes to pass. And again, if I'm very unlucky and all the publishers pass on it, you're still going to see it. I've put so much work into it thus far that I want to see this to fruition one way or another. If all the publishers pass on this because it's just not their style or maybe not what they're looking for at that time, I will get it up to that standard nonetheless and put it through on Kickstarter. Again, the intended crowd for this is the direct market, is the wide market. However, I think you guys will enjoy it anyway. And yeah, if it doesn't go exactly the way I hope, there's still a home for it. And I think, honestly, you guys will love it. The story's so cool. I'm in the middle of it right now, too, so I'm very excited about it in terms of developing it and getting everything done with this wonderful editor. Again, I can't wait to share who it is. It's such a big deal. She's amazing. So, yeah, big project coming up. I'm really hoping it pays off in the way I hope. But again, you'll see it one way or the other. My hope is that you're going to see it on the shelves of your LCS, and I'll be begging you to go and do your FOC and all that. So we'll see how that goes, but that's a big one for 2025. I have some more comics projects planned. However, I'm saving those for the very early stages section. I don't want to embarrass myself and cut a bunch of projects that I didn't fully think out. I'm putting them there as these might happen if everything goes well. You'll see my slate's very full, so it may be me biting off more than I can chew too. I'm really hoping to get to those, but as far as this is concerned, these are the 3 comic series that I'm working on, and you'll see more of all of them throughout the year. So what's next? Fiction work. So I mentioned when I was talking about Big Smoke Pulp Volume 1 that I really want to get back into doing my prose work and doing regular fiction. That said, I think it's going to be right up the alley of anybody that's listening to this or reading it. If you've read any of my work, you know I like to go very pulpy, very fast, very plot-driven, with some deep characters, but everyone's terribly flawed, and sometimes I'll throw in a noir ending here and there, but my goal is to always go very pulpy. It's what I love to read. I love to read just fun stuff. I'm not a literary person, so that's how my fiction goes, and that's what I'm aiming for. My goal this year is to get not just one, but a handful of series started. A lot of these are well in progress. A couple I have going for editorial assessments already as I'm working on the manuscripts for each, so a lot of fun stuff coming. But in terms of the one thing that's rock solid that I can definitely say is happening is Big Smoke Pulp Volume 2. That's right. Number 1 went so well that I have to do it again. So Big Smoke Pulp Volume 2. I'm going to be opening the call for entries probably in a month or so when I have some time in between Naked Kaiju Woman and the next issue from Parts Unknown. I know that once I open those gates, stories start flooding in, and I hate having people waiting for months at a time for me to read their work. So I want to make sure that I'm in a position that I can actually assess and read all of the stories that come through. I'm going to aim to launch it at the same time that I launched the first volume this year. So that was a November launch, and that's my goal, is to make November Big Smoke Pulp month. It's a good time for publishing work, and that's what I'm aiming for. So that means if I open up the call for entries in the early part of the year, we lock everything down in the summer, that'll give me time to make sure that the book is 100% done and formatted. And that was a challenge with Volume 1 that I ran into, where I was still working on formatting after the campaign was completed, which I didn't love. I want to always have my books more or less ready for print as soon as the money comes in. And there was also a challenge with Black Friday where I got a bit of a deal on printing, but I wasn't able to load the pages because they weren't formatted in the right way. I don't want to end up in that position. I want to end up ready for everything to be done. And as I mentioned in the post-mortem, I may look at different ways of printing this book, given it's a print book. So hopefully, with all of the other things I'm about to mention, I'll have that down pat by the time that Big Smoke Pulp Volume 2 comes out. I know the method and how to do all that. But call for entries will probably open, and I know a lot of you actually follow this newsletter based on Big Smoke Pulp, so I know this is the news you've been waiting for. So in around probably February, if not March, I will open up those call for entries, and yeah, I'll make it super clear at the top of the post and the project updates that they're now open, and I can't wait to read your stories. Hopefully we surpass what we did with the first one, both in backing and all that, but also the quality of stories and the breadth of stories, right? We got a lot of sci-fi and a lot of noir. I'm hoping we can get all kinds of genres. There's a little bit of sword and sorcery in there and some fantasy, but I'd love to read all kinds of stuff. I have my preferences, and that's maybe why we ended up with more noir and sci-fi, but I'm really hoping we can expand and go from there. So a lot of exciting things there. And one more thing to mention, if you haven't joined the Discord for Big Smoke Pulp, now's the time. I'll leave a link on the Substack if you're listening. Click that, join. We have some of the authors from the original, from Big Smoke Pulp Volume 1 in that Discord, along with myself. And yeah, we're just trying to have a nice little community of writers that enjoy the same kind of work. So join us on Discord if that's your bag. I really think you'll enjoy yourself. I mentioned that I really enjoy my pulpy work, and I think the next 3 series that I'm going to mention fall right in that domain. So the first one I'm working on is a space opera series. I like space opera in the sense that it doesn't go too deep into the science. I'm not a hard sci-fi guy. I don't know enough or care enough, frankly, to get into the specifics of how everything works. I don't know if The Martian, for instance, was scientifically accurate or bunk, and I didn't necessarily get into that whole argument. I like space opera because the point is more what is true to the world, right? The science only needs to make sense within the world building. The rules that are set up within the world, those are the rules you need to follow. It doesn't need to follow our world. It doesn't need to be exactly correct. Although I like to do a bit of research and make sure I'm not coming totally out of left field into the fantasy side of things. So I have a space opera story that I've been working on. My goal is to make this an ongoing series if it all goes right. And lengthwise, I'm actually aiming for novella size. So here's the thing. I write comic books, right? In comic books, usually you're following your one character or a handful of characters, and you're following them beginning to end. And it's just the way I prefer my stories. I even prefer to read novellas. So that's what I'm aiming for. And that's why I'm so confident in saying that I'm launching these as series, because I know that I can easily get novellas together. I know there's a challenge in that sense in terms of the independent author market and doing novellas. They don't tend to do as well as full-on novels, right? The more you can meet the word count expectations of readers, the better you're going to do. However, if I'm being true to myself, I have to stay within the type of writing that I enjoy to read, and that's what I'm going to be best at writing. And I've tried doing novels here and there. That's not to say I won't expand to novels at some point, but I think especially for the space opera series, my goal is to make it very action-packed, very tight. So I think novella is the way to go. I'll certainly be sharing more as this all comes together, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with this. The next one I have is a sci-fi romance series. So it may sound weird. I put sci-fi in there to soften the blow, but the truth is this is more romance than sci-fi. It's sci-fi in the way that Time Traveler's Wife was a sci-fi. I've done a post on my Apex anniversary, which is basically saying that I've been with my wife for longer than I've been without her. And I don't think you get there where you've been with somebody that long without being somewhat of a romantic. I enjoy my romance novels. I read a whole ton of them. I'm not a spicy romance guy. Maybe it's because I've been with my high school sweetheart my whole life that I'm a prude in that way, and I don't necessarily care to read that level of stuff. I don't have anything wrong with it. I think it's you do you. I just can't write it without getting squeamish. Rather than leaning on the steamy end of things, I'm leaning on the sci-fi end of things. But it's certainly a romance series, and it's written in the way that romance novels are written today. We start with our main couple, and then as we meet their friends in the expanded cast, the sequels will follow them finding their love and all of that. And I think it's a really neat concept. I have no idea how it's going to do. I'm not a romance writer in particular, but I love the genre. And again, I'm not doing this so much to make it big in one genre or another. I just want to do what I enjoy. That's the fun of being an independent author and an independent writer, is that you do what you want. You write to market, right? You write things that people would want to read. But I don't think putting yourself in a box is a way to have any fun and the way to get any cool stories, right? I could just be writing the same thing over and over, but I want to show what I'm able to do. And I think writing a romance series, even if it's tethered to sci-fi, to make it somewhat familiar to not only me, but my audience, is a way to go. I think it'll be a ton of fun. It's a story I've been really, at least the main book, it's a story I've been thinking about for a really long time. I just don't think you could get the depth that you get in a romance novel in a comic unless I get 40 issues, and that's very hard to do as an indie. I can't wait to share this one with you. It's very off the wall in terms of what you would have expected based on my whole catalog of work, but I think if you read it, you'll see the themes behind it, and that it's definitely written by me, because I'm me. I have my own viewpoint, and I think you will still enjoy it. If you enjoyed anything I've read, this will still be very much up your alley. I still have a certain pace I like to follow. I think keeping things breezy and moving forward while still providing that depth of character and all that is key. It's going to be romance, but it's going to be pulpy. And that's what I hope you can expect from me going forward, that if I'm writing it, regardless of genre, it's going to be pulpy. So speaking of that, the other series that I'm working on this year is a time travel mystery series. I have titles for all of these. I'm not sharing them right now because they may change, but this time travel mystery series, this is the first of the novel series that I actually thought up and started to write and outlined and did all that business. However, I think it needs a little more research because the time travel aspect of it. I didn't want to give myself homework, and I did. I usually try to write things that I can do off the cuff and then research and fill in the gaps. This one, I've put myself in a corner where I have to do some research before I really dig into the writing. Like, I put things in certain eras, but I have to really go back, and unlike the space opera where I feel like I've given myself some leeway to build the rules and then follow them, the time travel series only works if I get the time travel right. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. I really love the main character of this series, and I think based on how strong that character is, I can easily transplant this into a comic series as well. I, again, initially thought of this one as a comic series, but I really want to establish the character, the mechanics, and all that very much in depth, and then have that spin-off comic series once you have some of that context. So I'm thinking a little broader in how this series will play out, and because of that, I put it last because this still needs the most work in terms of world building and really planning the production end to end. However, it's going to be, that said, it's going to be so much fun when it's all together. It's the one that I'm working on the side while I have the other two series going full steam ahead, because I want to get those out as soon as possible, really, while the time travel series, I'm really honing and trying to make a good sense of it, as it has to be a little more grounded than the other two would be. So I think that series is going to be a lot of fun when it's all together, but expect the space opera and the romance series to be ready well before this one sees the light of day. In terms of distribution of all these series, my goal is to always start on Kickstarter. That might be a challenge given the backlog now between From Parts Unknown and Naked Kaiju Woman having nearly monthly launches. It'll be hard to squeeze in a novel or even a novella series in there, but I'll see what I can do. Worst case, I may have to set a secondary account up so that I can separate the comics from the novels. I prefer not to do that, but we'll see what we can do. If I have to shorten the time in between and have a couple of campaigns in fulfillment at the same time, so be it. But the goal is to do that. Always launch with a Kickstarter. Have some really cool exclusives like hardcovers and things like that available only through Kickstarter. And then jump over to the usual KDP and Kobo, Google Books, Apple Books, all that business. So basically go wide after a Kickstarter. But the Kickstarter will almost be like a pre-release. So if you ever want to get ahead and get the early copies of things and get the exclusive copies of things, Kickstarter will be where it's at. So that's the goal. Should be a lot of fun. Like I said, all of these are in flight, so they will happen in some form or another this year. So they will happen at some point this year. Again, that time travel mystery, we'll see if it makes it this year, similar to the sequels to Naked Kaiju Woman. It may just get pushed into 2026, but my hope is to also get that out. I want to rapid release is the name of the game this year, so my goal is to get as much as I can out. And to those of you that support everything I do, I'm going to stretch that a little bit this year. If a wrestling comic book isn't for you, we'll have something totally different. If space opera isn't for you, we'll have something totally different in romance. I'm not trying to please all audiences. I'm trying to please myself and all the different things I'm into. And I think being able to tackle all of these things simultaneously is keeping me very interested, very motivated to get it all out to you. So 2025, very exciting. One thing that's totally different from anything I've worked on that I'm very excited to share is a trading card game that I'm putting together with a very good friend of mine, Dane Hennessy. I don't want to share too much about this one. It's still in the very, very early stages, but we've done a playthrough of the game. It plays really well. We've refined it quite a bit. We probably have a couple more playthroughs in our future as we expand the game with more players and that, and see how that all goes before we really start ramping up and getting into production, and we can start sharing how this game is played and what it all looks like. But I see how healthy the gaming space is on Kickstarter, and I just didn't want to be left out. I had the right person in Danon to reach out to about it. Danon's my film school buddy. We have worked on projects together for decades now, and I think this is one of the biggest ones we may have done. I'm very excited for how it's all coming together, and if not for the physical distance between us and how difficult it is to actually get time to be in a room together and actually put this whole game together, it would probably be a lot further along. That said, it's giving us a lot of time to mull over it and make sure that we're putting together the best possible product we can. And yeah, and you'll be seeing that hopefully mid next year. I'll certainly be sharing a lot more as it comes out. As I mentioned earlier about the backlog of Kickstarter campaigns, this one will actually avoid that because it's going to all be under Danon's account. He's the game guy. He actually has a company of his own, Dyson Development. If you saw us in Niagara, hopefully you picked up his card. He's doing some really cool things, so you should check out his site as well when you get a chance. He's still starting all that up, but I think this Western trading card game will be the coming out party, not only for us in the gaming space, but his company, and I'm just so happy to be a part of it. I think we came up with something amazing, and I really can't wait to start showing everybody it and getting people playing, and hopefully we'll go to some of these board game cafes out here and the gaming shops and all that and get this in everyone's hands we can, because we really want people to jump on board this game. We think it could be something really big if we do it right. I'm very excited for it. I wish I could share more, but not my place. I just wanted to let you know that something big in the gaming space is coming out, and I'll certainly be sharing a lot more as we nail things down, but very happy to be getting this together. In terms of where you're going to hear about it, there's one obvious place. The Instant Ink Comic Book Podcast. So that'll be going strong through next year. I'm starting to get a lot better at getting it all edited and getting ahead of the game. I know the website hasn't been always updated as quickly as it could. Frankly, if I'm being entirely honest, the podcast is a lot of work to put together. I don't have any regrets about it, but it's a little more than I suspected it would be. That said, we're so far ahead in terms of us recording and episodes coming out that I'm getting a little bit of relief as I'm able to put all this together. Very excited to have more of these episodes coming out in 2025. And hopefully, if we're doing it right, this momentum carries right through the end of the year. It should be a lot of fun on the podcast this year. For anyone that's listening or reading this and you're interested in being on the podcast, just shoot me an email and let me know. You don't have to be a comic writer or artist or anything. If you have a very deep interest in comics or even just literature and writing and pulpy stuff, by all means, be on the show. Even if comics aren't your bag, feel free to check out the podcast and see how we do it. We certainly hold your hand in getting a page created, so if it's not something you're familiar with, we'll make sure that we get something awesome done together. So don't be afraid to join us. Just give me a shout. I'll send you a calendar and we'll get something scheduled and we'll make a cool comic page together. Let's talk about the stuff that is way too early to be talking about, but I'm going to do it anyway. The very early stages stuff. So last year I committed to doing a comic strip and then quickly realized that I'm not where I want to be as an artist. You saw I had some fun with Inktober. That was me doodling. I wasn't really putting time into making things look good. I was just doing enough so that I could get the page out. And even then, time got away from me and I didn't finish Inktober this year. And that's my concern with starting a comic strip. I've been doing some stuff on the side and I've been working on it, but it's not something that I can commit and say it's definitely coming out. I see all the fun that's happening on Global Comics with verticals, and although verticals I'm still trying to wrap my head around, I don't necessarily love the format reading wise, but I'm liking the experimental nature of it, and it seems to be very popular, and I want in. Although I was aiming to do comic strips like the old newspaper Garfield style comic strips, I'm into trying vertical. I've already been thinking about how I can do it a little differently, that it's not just going to be a strip that's vertical, it'll be something made for the platform. But that takes a lot of time that would take away from these other projects, and you can see my plate's pretty full. So although it's on my list, it may not be something that'll make it in 2025 unless I can find an artist who wants to work on it. I have 3 strips fully written for a year's worth of content just sitting there and waiting for me to learn how to draw to do it. So I actually had an artist that I was working with, and that kind of fell through as there was some complications and just getting a hold of them, so it didn't work out. But I would love to get these strips out there, whether in vertical or strip format. And then I have actually a 4th that I was going to put ahead of all that. That's the one I announced, Working Afterlife. If anything, I might get that out, even just as a goof. I have a few stories for that as well. This is very much in the we'll see category, but my goal is to, at some point, experiment with comic strips and verticals, and we'll see how that goes. As far as doing traditional comics on Kickstarter, I have one idea I've been developing, but it's still so early and I'm still not 100% on it. But I wanted to do a body hopping type series. Not as serious as an Altered Carbon or Old Man's War, but I want to do something in that vein with that concept. But of course, with the way I think of things, it always ends up being a little stranger and a little sillier. And that's what I'm working on. It's very early stages. I'm still not even locked down on the characters and all that. But it's an idea I really want to explore. So if I get a new series together by the end of the year, it may be this one. It's January. Who knows if this one makes it out of the idea bank. I have a whole bunch of other ideas that I'm developing, but this one seems to be the furthest along, but still not far enough to commit and say I'm definitely doing this one. So we'll see if this one comes to life. The other thing I'm working on, and I'm a little hesitant to say it, but it's a romance slice of life shonen manga. So I mentioned how I really enjoy the romance genre, and I was talking primarily about novels and that, but I also really enjoy the manga that's being put out in this slice of life romance category, especially the shonen type. Like, I like the really long, drawn out, will they, won't they, oh my god, she touched my hand in issue 40 kind of thing. So I have an idea that's in that vein. Maybe I won't take that long to get to it being an indie, and that would be terribly expensive to not have a payoff after that much time. But I really love the vibe of the whole shonen manga. And just that feeling of finding your first love and all that. Again, I mentioned I've been with my wife since high school, and I'm always looking back at that time very fondly of when we first met and when it was all still new and all that business, without all the problems of adulthood and all that nonsense that comes with it and all your expectations from past relationships and blah, blah, blah. It's all just new. And I love that. And I think manga does it almost better than anyone else. I want to dip my toe in that. Same idea. I have my characters. I have a very loose outline, but I haven't really dug into this. Of the things I've listed thus far, this is probably the most likely thing that will happen. We'll see how it all comes out. I don't know if Kickstarter would be the home for it, especially if I keep it short, or is it something that I do on Global Comics and then collect it on Kickstarter? It's still very early. It's still too early to tell, and the reason it's in the early stages is not so much the story and that. I think I have a good handle on that. It's how do I make this work? If I were in a position where everything was super profitable and I had some money to play with, this would be on the it's happening list. However, to do it right, I think I need to invest quite a bit, and I'm not in a liquid position given every campaign I've done thus far has not crossed that line into the black quite yet. So this one waits for either a sustainable model or some campaigns that overperform, allowing me to invest in this a lot better. And the last kind of thing, this is a very big, broad category, but articles and short stories for publications. So this is something I fell off on as I was really focusing on trying to get everything done for the Kickstarters and going to all these conventions, and basically like my free time was taken up, especially considering I had a day job. I didn't have it anymore. I didn't spend as much time putting articles together, though I still got a couple out there, and I didn't spend much time doing short stories, and I spent a bit of time doing short stories. The ones I did do, I threw in as stretch goals in the first volume of Big Smoke Pulp, so if you're curious how those went, they're all in there in the back pages, thanks to all of the wonderful backers who just kept hitting those stretch goals. So those short stories found a home, but that wasn't my original intent. My intent was to try to get in other people's work and submit those short stories everywhere I could, and it's something I want to get back on. So we'll see. Again, my plate is very full, but the wonderful thing about a short story is you can have something done in a weekend if you focus. Focus is hard, but in theory I could get these things done real quick. I want to get back into writing more short stories. Hopefully it'll give me a bit of a break from writing all the novellas and novels and the comics and all that other stuff I'm working on, that when I just need to get my head in somewhere else, this will be where it is. And then articles, again, there's a few publications, online publications that I'm a huge fan of. And I want to start querying more to get articles on their sites as well. The big goal is expand my profile, get my name out there, bring more people into this tent, and hopefully all of these projects will just grow and grow from there. That's the goal. I'm hoping to do that through my articles. I'm always writing on the Substack, and yeah, there's a few places else I'd like to end up. One of the places I'm going to start experimenting with is Medium, posting articles and that. My main thing now is just to find some consistency in doing so. I have one publication that I'm going to put together called Beyond the Blockbuster. That one's focused on talking about the business of movies. So not just movies in themselves, but the business of movies. I like that platform quite a bit. There's a lot of cool stuff. I find a lot of the articles there, though, are how can you do well on Medium, which is a little bit cannibalistic in nature. You do see a little bit of that on Substack too. A lot of the most successful Substack writers are people writing about Substack. That's not the way I want to go about it on there. If anything, I'm going to talk about my interests that I don't get to talk about in this newsletter. If that happens, I will share it in the future, but I didn't want to put it as a sure thing because I'm still on the fence of if I should be spending all my time getting those articles together or just working on these stories that I said are definitely happening. That's where I want to spend all my energy, and then if I have anything left over, then I'll focus on the other stuff. And this newsletter, of course, will continue to come out weekly. I'm going to keep working ahead where I can. Some things are time sensitive, but my goal is to always have something in the hopper to give you every Wednesday at noon. So that's the plan as far as projects go. And that's what 2025 looks like. Last year I went with a theme of new year, new everyone kind of thing, right? It's super corny. Forgive me for it. I'm going to do it anyway. I was really thinking about reinventing myself as this Kickstarter guy, as this comic writer. That was my goal. I write comics, and everywhere I went I was actually calling myself a writer, and I had books to point to. It was something that I had always dreamt of doing, and although I had a couple books out there that did really well in Unlimited Udo and Stay Cool, like my goal in 2024 was to really establish that, to get my name out there, to have people think of me when they see the work, and have it all coalesce as one, and I think I achieved that mostly. Of course, there's a lot more to go, but I think in terms of people seeing me as a writer and creator, that's come about. So very happy with how that's all happened. I think the theme worked, although I don't really think it did anything. So what's the theme for 2025? If you're reading, you already read it, but if you're listening, it is all or nothing. You could see how big the slate of things I want to do this year is. That's for a reason. I'm making up for lost time, number one. But number two is I put so much money and time into this, and this is the year that it needs to start paying off in some form or fashion. I don't need to break even on everything I've spent, right? A lot of this I would consider an investment. I'll consider all the prior campaigns an investment for me to get here. But the goal is this year to cross that threshold to where this business becomes sustainable. Right now, if it wasn't for my day job, none of this happens. There's no way that I could continue putting out books and lose money every single time I do it, even though they're doing well and I'm clearly building an audience. So 2025 is where I get to cash in on all that investment I made in 2024. So this year, all or nothing. I'm going to put my full effort into making these books work and having some wonderful books behind them and doing everything I can to get my name out there. Again, that's why I'm pitching to publishers and all that, because getting a book on the shelves in the stores will hopefully make a name for myself and drive more people to the Kickstarter and become all cyclical, and hopefully one thing feeds the other and back and forth, right? That's the goal. That's the reason we're doing the Instant Ink comic book podcast. That's the reason I'm going to start jumping on more podcasts out there and trying to make a name for myself that way. But this is the goal. Just get out there, talk to everyone, be everywhere I can, and really make 2025 the year that this becomes a proper, full-fledged business that's successful, and hopefully with all this stuff I'm doing, I can keep going from there and can keep expanding, and then every dollar I make I can keep sinking back into the business and do those projects that are on the fence, because I don't know if they'll make their money back on their own, but I'll have other projects that can fund the ones that are less certain, and that's the goal, right? Like, I'm not doing this just to make money. I'm doing this to make art. That's 2025. And yeah, I thank you for listening. I know this was a long one, but it'll be a long year that'll feel very short with all the stuff I have planned, but it'll be a lot of fun. I'm so happy you're here with me, and here's to having a wonderful 2025. Happy New Year. All right, so what's coming up on the Substack in the next few weeks? On January 8th, let's get Naked Kaiju Woman, a comic series with nothing to hide. This is launch day for Naked Kaiju Woman. So again, having that big year, very important. It starts here. It starts with you going to the page right now and clicking follow on the pre-launch page, so that when we launch on January 8th, you're ready to back. And then we can have a real big launch day and start the year off with a bang. That's what I'm hoping. And then January 15th, The Magic of Dictation, a writing hack for hacks like me. Believe it or not, I don't actually use my fingers to write everything. That's how I'm able to get so much of this done, including these newsletter updates. I dictate and I edit, and the edit takes 10 times as long as the dictation. We'll talk about that next week. And January 22nd, staying in the theme of Naked Kaiju Woman, Taboo and Kickstarter. Do you need to do an NSFW book to be successful? A lot to unpack there, especially with the campaign that I'll be doing in Naked Kaiju Woman. It'll be a lot of fun to really delve into that, and hopefully with context of how that campaign is going, we'll have a better answer for you on that post. So I won't get into the upcoming appearances or the release calendar. I will tell you to check out the Instant Ink comic book podcast. We took a bit of a break over the holiday, but we'll be back with episodes with Frank Martin. We actually took his idea with his podcast right now and transformed it into what became Instant Ink. It's a weird full circle moment to have him on. He was also in Big Smoke Pulp Volume 1 and was kind enough to forego his fee of $1 for his drabble, which is 100 words long, but it's still an excellent story. You need to check it out if you got the book, and if you didn't, it'll be available wide soon. Check out Instant Ink while you can. And yeah, that's it for this week. So this is a very long post, and I covered everything there is to cover right now, so I'm going to keep this epilogue as short as ever. Just thank you. It's 2024, wonderful year. Everything went so great. I'm really hoping 2025 is even better. It needs to be for this to keep going. Again, I don't want to seem so dark. I know I'm in that place. It's tax season, so I'm getting in that mindset of, wow, there's a lot going out and not a lot coming in. So I'm hoping that 2025 remedies that. But yeah, I don't want to dwell on that. There's just so much cool stuff I want to share. And that's the only reason I'm stressed out about the money, right? It's not about, I have the day job to pay the bills. That's doing its job. But in terms of getting all of the art and all the cool stuff I want to get out there, it needs to be somewhat successful to get there. Here's hoping for a great 2025. It all happens with your help and your support. So I thank you so much. have a wonderful New Year. Happy New Year. I hope you had a great night. If you're listening to this on the day it came out, I hope you're not too hungover and you're feeling really good and cozy and great. We'll talk next week when we launch Naked Kaiju Woman. Very excited for that. Anyways, have a great 2025. We'll talk next week. Thank you.